It was super helpful, and I was worried that we weren't going to get enough for tonight. But then everyone sent theirs in, and now we have enough for at least the next couple of days. Very happy that everyone was able to send everything in, and yeah, full slate for tonight, full slate for tomorrow morning, and if anyone wants to add anything, we'll get to it as early as tomorrow night. But it's awesome to have enough material for sure. Yeah, thank you all very much for that. Since we have a full slate, I think we can get started pretty quickly. I'm just gonna pull this game. Wampy sent in this game. He was playing white, and I'll plug it in here right now. Let's see. But yeah, no, I appreciate everyone from Reddit, everyone from the chess club, chess study group, Discord. Really just everyone helping out to make sure that we have enough material for today. Thanks all for that. So yeah, this is Wampy's game. Wampy plays white. It's out of the London system with e3, knight c6, and basically just to play through to give a good general sense. It looks like a pretty good game. It gets tactically complicated in the late middle game. But ultimately, Wampy is able to, ultimately Wampy basically sends a, basically gets a good mate on the king side with two rooks with a queen sack. Queen sack looks pretty good, but let's take a look at the early middle game to see if there's any strategic concepts on which there can be some kind of improvement. This looks fine. We're in the opening book. Eval looks positive for white. Pretty solid. Basically, white has a solid pawn center. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Six. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the stream. This is a very good pawn center for white. This is solid. The bishop's on the other side of the pawn center on a strong diagonal. And this doesn't really offer black many opportunities to generate an attack. Here, basically, I think under this strong pawn center, white can come up with a couple developing moves and not worry too much about potential attacks coming in. Knight d2 is a deviation from theory. Knight f3 is theory. Knight d2, I guess, potentially leaves e5 as a play or a play on the next several moves. Here, basically, knight d2 does follow the general concept, which is to get as much development as possible while there's good center and good opportunity for piece play. But knight f3 maybe stronger and more directly controls the e5 square. But either's fine. Knight d2, bishop d6, possibly preparing for a push on e5 the next move. Bishop g3, pawn takes, and here it's sort of interesting. I mean, this e5 is a good pawn break for black. Potentially, white could generate an attack on a post castled kingside, but this pawn structure still should be favorable for white. With knight f3 and potentially bishop to d3, the squares should be pretty well controlled. Everything, white should have basically initiative and control of this game. So knight f3, e5, and obviously the e5 pawn can't be retained by white here. It's too many pieces for attack and not enough pieces for defense. f4 can't really be played. So yeah, white's gonna have to give back the pawn here. I guess I would probably play bishop e2 here. Knight f3 also looks playable. Maybe knight f3 is better, but bishop e2, straightforward development, castle's queenside. I think white has a good position, and yeah, hey, welcome Hyperion. Thank you for joining the stream. So yeah, so anyways, this queenside castling and complete development for white is an advantage. If you look at this position, white's development is much better, and that's pretty much what's responsible for the edge that the eval gives white. Basically, this king has castled. This rook is facing towards the rook on h8, and yeah, positional games. Okay, so yeah, so it's a good question, Banana Reno. The best positional trainer, the one that I used, is one called Peshka. And it's made by it's made by basically the same software developers that created CT-ART. But I don't know if any of you have gotten an opportunity to take a look at CT-ART. It basically is a set of modules that focus on specific tactical concepts. CT-ART is great. Peshka is also very good, maybe not as good as CT-ART, but the Peshka positional training is very strong. Like the Peshka positional training basically has a it's the same concept as yeah, sure, no, happy to link it. It's the same basic concept as CT-ART, but Peshka Peshka positional trainer. It's the same kind of modularization as it's the same modularization as CT-ART, but here there aren't the same kind of decisive tactics. They're sort of what I was talking about, tactical maneuvers to secure positional advantage, with basically done in the same way as CT-ART is. Here. So this link I think gives a good summary. For some reason it didn't go straight to the Amazon link, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. This is the program. You should be able to see, based on that program, sort of what the topic is. Like it's basically a modular positional games, and it's a modular positional game trainer, but solid. Yeah, no, it's good. I guess I would focus primarily on tactics. I guess I'm a tactical player, but that is a good positional trainer, and I've known masters and high-level masters who have spent some time and speak highly of that program. So yeah, I think that'll work pretty well if you're looking for kind of a similar trainer, but with a positional as opposed to tactical focus. I think tactical focus is the highest priority, under 2,000, but I'm sure that going through that program, if you do it consistently and put enough time into it, will absolutely help your game. No doubt in my mind. Anyways, I think the positional, I think the positional play here is better for white. White didn't really develop this rook, but it has kind of the mobility of a developed piece here. Particularly if white can play like f3, g4, and put pressure on the h6 pawn. This is going to be pretty, this is going to be a pretty strong attack on the king side. The rook wouldn't have improved at all and moved to anywhere else. White's development is better. Black's development, everything's on the 8th rank. So I think white has basically, probably 3 tempos worth of compensation in order to offset that. Basically three extra tempos worth of compensation that black's going to need to invest himself to catch up. But yeah, c4, queen b3. White's king safety is this is a little bit precarious. This long diagonal into the white queen side, and potentially threats on d3 from the knight are dangerous. But we'll see. f4, knight g4. And here, basically white secures an opening of the black king side and has a pretty large advantage. So here, basically h6, knight f3, e5. But basically white has used this opportunity that black's using to recapture this pawn in order to develop. Yeah, I think eventually this leans towards equality until white is capable of breaking open the king side. Here, queen b3 is played. The bishop does secure that diagonal, so white has to be very careful. But on any take of c4, white will get to play e5 as a response. So I guess that this is a difficult position where black has practical compensation. But the eval still leans heavily towards white's favor here. White appears to black hangs the pawn on d5 with e4. The d5 pawn is supported, and white's center is good here. This is going to hold pretty strong. Basically this game moves very quickly towards white's advantage. I guess I don't know. I wouldn't say that bishop f5 is a bad move, but it does seem to shift the eval. I guess the move that I really think is not good is black's response here, where c takes d5 is allowed. B6 doesn't do much to bishop d6. I guess prevents the b7 pawn from getting lost. But I think there's probably a better response here for black. The engine suggests this counterattack, knight to g4, and then moving to knight f2 and forking the rooks. I guess there's a few different options here. But the c5 pawn definitely doesn't need to be lost, and if it is going to get lost, it should be a loss of the d5 pawn, or it shouldn't be the loss of the d5 pawn. It should be the loss of the b7 pawn, not the d5 pawn. Losing the d5 pawn allows white to successfully execute his consolidation of the center and play e4. Here, yeah, I guess. I mean, basically, this goes from relatively close to equal to a +3. So I think finding a better move for black here is going to be a pretty good strategic concept. Black, the engine is offering castles. The engine is offering this knight g4 counterattack on f2. That's probably objectively the best. This at least is a threat that white will have to deal with. F2 is hanging here, and f3 isn't possible. So, if white ends up winning one of the pawns, either b7 or d5, the knight will move to f2 and get back some material there. E4, is the proposed line, but here this is a very unclear position. This is a much stronger defense for black in that it gets an exchange, or at least this piece here. But this trades off relatively close to equality. So the problematic move for black here was b6. Queen b3, and then b6 is played, hanging the d5 pawn. Where else can improvements be made? There's three options here that lead things to be closer for white. But knight g4 creating this counterattack is the one that basically gives the best chance to black. Still a 0.5 eval initiative for white, but at least that's a little bit closer. F4, knight g4, knight f2, and white has basically won here. And there's a cool queen sack at the end, so let's check out the queen sack. Basically, so the knight does get to f2, but at this point white has opened up the black king side, and then there's a cool queen sack. Queen takes e5 here. This actually is this wins with bishop to d3. With bishop to d3, this diagonal is held up, and this bishop and this rook can be maintained on g6. Maintaining the rook on g6 is the important part of this attack. White actually plays bishop to b5, and on bishop to b5, bishop takes f5 here. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're interested in. The classic club is the Marshall Chess Club. It's a bit expensive, but there's many tournaments in New York. There's a nice club that I like in Connecticut. It's the Fairfield County Chess Club. They have rated quads every Saturday, and they have for quite a while. So that's a nice place to play if you're interested in going a little bit outside of the city. But yeah, it's up to you. Marshall Chess Club is the classic historic New York club. The Manhattan Chess Club also used to exist, but does not at this point. So yeah, there's also some good chess clubs in New Jersey. Westfield Chess Club has, I don't know if they restarted it after COVID, but they have, they have some good quads that they do on Sundays. At least pre-COVID they did. Now it's mostly seems to be online. But between New Jersey, New York City, and Connecticut, they're all good chess clubs. One I like actually is one run by my friend Terrell. He runs this one called Kings of Queens Chess. So I'll just give them a quick. I guess I can give them a quick shout out just in case. Uh, uh, just in case you're interested. But they actually run great rated tournaments every Friday, or sorry, every Wednesday and every Sunday at a pool hall in a pool hall in Astoria, which is pretty close to where I am. And yeah, this is a very nice chess group. Good vibe. So if you guys are interested in New York, this one has regular rated play that I've played in a bunch of times. But lots of different options. Marshall Chess Club is the historical one, and Manhattan was one before that. Anyways, this yeah, so this sacrifice is sound. It's sound conditional on bishop to d3. With basically with bishop to d3, the rook on g6 can be maintained, and this rook can move to the h file. Without bishop to d3, this bishop takes f5 becomes kind of a saving sacrifice for black. Rook takes f5, and then this g6 pawn is hanging, or this g6 rook is hanging, and rook h1 no longer delivers a mating attack. But anyways, this sack ends up working, given that the black bishop doesn't take f5. This ends up being winning. This bishop provides the clearance square for the rook, and overall, yeah, it ends up being a good and sound queen sack. The correct follow-up move for white was bishop to d3, but anyways, it's all it's basically a strong sacrifice, a good fundamental idea. And in any case, the black bishop didn't take on b5, so the rook could play to h1. Anyways, this is very interesting, and a good outcome for white. Interesting idea, cool queen sack, good execution, and yeah, good ability to establish a strong pawn center. Anyways, this looks really great. White managed to consolidate his center with d4, d5. Pretty solid play. The main improvement that I found is just bishop to b5 allows allows a tactical basically allows a tactical shot with bishop takes f5, and then rook h1. But since that wasn't played, the queen sacrifice was fundamentally sound. It's just that the correct follow-up move was bishop to d3 and not bishop to b5. So anyways, very interesting. Thank you very much for sending that, Wampy, and I hope to see you on the stream again. Please keep sending games. We'll take a look at them. But yeah, here's the next one. Just let me pull that up. No. So let's look at this. This bishop to d3. The bishop takes f5 is a tough move to see. It basically, you're sort of eliminating this. You're eliminating the defense on this rook in kind of an indirect way. Here, I feel like this is probably black's best opportunity to see it. Bishop takes b5 allows for a white rook to h1 checkmate, but yeah, bishop takes f5 is actually the best chance for black. This is still kind of a tricky situation. This rook is hanging, but anyways, it's pretty I don't know. I guess I would say it's fairly tricky. But the best opportunity for black. It's good that black didn't see this during the game. But the queen sack actually was sound. So I want to give credit to the positional idea or the tactical idea that makes queen takes e5 and then clearance for the rook on the one rank. Basically successful. But I would not. But bishop to b5 was not the correct tactical follow-up. Bishop to d3 was. Just because this maintenance on this rook is extremely important. I also wonder if g3 was like, g3, yeah, I guess g3 and, black just challenges the rook directly with f6. But I was just thinking in this terms of the same fundamental concept. White needs a move that supports the defense on g6 and also provides clearance for this rook on the 1 file. Anyways, after queen h4, rook h4, and checkmate. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at the next one. The next one is from My Goal 2400, and we will take a look at that now. Yeah, no, thank you very much for sending it in, 6bet. Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Owen defense again. We've played this opening a few times. Basically, the purpose of the Owen defense is a flank opening with an early b6, knight c3, f4, knight f3, d5, and here basically white has established a good center and a lead. This Owen defense, just for anyone who's new to the stream, I talk about this a lot. The purpose of a flank opening is basically to get your opponent, basically gives your opponent a better pawn center and better, more space and better opportunity for piece development with his spatial advantage. But hopes that your opponent will overextend with his pawns, usually with like e5 or d5 at a situation when it's premature. So this, this idea, this big center idea, is part of Black's plan, really. The idea of a flank opening is that you're giving the opponent an advantage in the center. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, but it means that you should do it with the concept of, your opponent is hoping for an overextension. So when you do make the extension, be very deliberate about it. But anyways, this all looks correct, and by this point, white secured almost a 1-pawn advantage here. So like castles, bishop e6, all of this is pretty solid for white. H5, and overall, white's got a good position here. Queen g4. This is gonna queen g4. I don't know, is maybe a little bit too ambitious. But knight c e4 works. This queen is hanging. So yeah, so knight c4. Knight c4 followed by knight d6, I think is a reasonable play here. That's what I would look at. It looks difficult. It's hard to see because this queen is pinned. But white is in good shape, needing more pieces on this king side. And knight c e4, which is a knight that can't be taken, is a pretty good way to do that. White's got good chances here. This looks pretty solid. Basically, not until relatively late does the position swing towards black. Let's just check this, because I really like white's position as of like move 8. This center is white. Basically this, there's this d5 into e4 threat, c5 into d4 threat, and overall, white has better development. Bishop b7 could potentially provide an opportunity for the bishop to develop to the fianchetto and put pressure on the king side. But overall, I think white's got a better play here, and certainly after king f8, which is a pretty unnecessary move. Like, king f8, I guess the idea of king f8 is to avoid hanging the d5 pawn or avoid obstructing the defense of the queen on the d5 pawn. But at the end of the day, this this king move is not so good. It basically forces, it cements this development. It makes that rook, very difficult to connect to the other rook. And, bishop d7, which I guess, basically it doesn't really hang d5, either, because bishop takes d5, bishop takes b5 is a good response. That is a better alternative for black, like significantly. This d5 pawn isn't really directly hanging. On knight takes d5, bishop takes b5, so there's a move or two needed to expand the attack on the d5 pawn from white if the goal of capturing the d5 pawn is like the main goal. But overall here, king f8 is kind of a move that solves the immediate threat, but doesn't really help black's position in the longer term. King f8, castles, h5, king h1, and here, white probably opens his kingside more than he needs to. This bishop is very strong on that diagonal, but black has many problems relating to this king placement and some of his underdevelopment, like knight c4, knight ce4, which is the correct book, like the correct the computer proposed response here, is a very awkward move to be playable. Development here shouldn't be so bad that the queen is hanging on d8. It's weird to have developed in this way. Like king f8 leaves the defense of the queen on d8, and the lack of knight development, queenside knight development, blocks off the rook from the defense on d8. It's unusual for the queen to be hanging like that, but in any case, black has made these kinds of developmental decisions, and the decision to play king f8. Here, I think it's double-edged, but white has several opportunities to capitalize. With queen g4, d4 becomes a lot more dangerous. This bishop finally realizes its strength on this diagonal. Knight c6. And this attack, if this attack peters out, basically, this diagonal is going to become a big liability for white. So what's really needed is an attack on the king side, as soon as possible. Queen g4 brings over a piece, and is the right concept because you definitely do need to bring over a piece. But just the tactical idea of knight ce4 brings over the knight as opposed to the queen as the piece. And basically that's that's a better piece to support this attack. Queen g4 is a good idea, but from a tactical perspective, it's hard to get the queen in to attack f7. Like ideally, you would be able to get the queen in to attack f7, or to try to maybe sack on f7 and then f5 or something like that. But it just doesn't quite have the tactical backing it needs to continue the advance. So the engine proposes knight ce4, which is really a great move. Difficult to see because it's so weird to have the queen hanging on d8. But even moves like bishop to d3, and put pressure on the king side, as well as provide a defensive resource if needed on e4, makes intuitive sense to me. Bishop b2 also for the same concept, could support defense. As bishop to f3, but yeah. Anyways, this is pretty interesting. Knight forks on f7, but the king side is so vulnerable that there's not much that can be done. White's willing to sacrifice a full rook here, but even that doesn't really end the attack. So let's go back, because I actually I think this is a pretty good and interesting game. Standing here, white has a very good early middle game position. This is something that white should be able to secure an initiative in and potentially win. Maybe knight d4, bishop b5, but overall this center is sort of the center that white often gets against a flank opening, but one that is objectively better. Maybe okay, so yeah, sure. I'll check it out. 6. Queen f3, rook takes f3, and yeah. I mean, the main issue with your defense here is this open diagonal for the bishop. If you're interested in spending like a move or two on because okay, so you're thinking like here, like king g1 in this type of position. It's a good question, like for sure, and definitely, I really appreciate you participating, and it really helps the stream when I sort of know where to focus. But king g1 here, is a move that makes sense. I mean, it basically, you may end up having that tempo here on d4. Basically, if there's a discovered attack, the king moves to g1 anyways. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. I mean, bishop e2 may be playable, bishop d3 may be playable, but queen g4, was sort of, it was the right idea, but sort of an inefficiency. Black will get another piece in there. So on e6, f5. Yeah, knight to f7 is this basically allows a very powerful discovery and the bishop to get to g2. A full rook is sacked here, and it's under the position's under a lot of strain. It's tricky. I guess maybe this is the position that I would re-examine, because here you basically have the pawn on d5 blocking the strength of this bishop on b7. If you can sort of maintain that, that would probably be helpful. And I don't really think that black has the ability to force you off of the defense of d4. Like I think as white you can hold d4 with the knights for a while. Black may play an undermining move like f6 or something and try to get in, but this diagonal can't really be allowed. So here I think you have a thematic move, which is basically d takes c5 allows this diagonal and basically allows black control over the white squares in the center. It still might be the best move, but I would be tempted to play like bishop b5 or potentially bishop to e3. Bishop e3 you also have to be sort of careful with because black has the tactical shot knight f5, but overall d takes c5 opens white up to some attack. But what are the alternatives? Like, I guess maybe knight to b5 here is sort of interesting. I'm choosing moves that aren't on the list intentionally. Knight to b5 I think is interesting. It gets the white knight that d6 outpost that's going to be pretty hard for black to correct. Maybe with knight f5, knight takes f5 or something. But in any case, yeah, pawn takes c5, pawn takes c5, bishop b5, and overall white's I think white's in pretty good shape, even with the d4 pawn having left. Yeah, so here's basically, this is a good position for white. This is sort of what you want out of the opening. And ways you can keep this position from getting too open are probably the best course of action. I'm also wondering if there's any potential for castling on the queen side, but I think from a strategic perspective, just keeping that d5 pawn there feels like something that should be possible here. Is it possible? I think so. Like, let's see. So something like knight f5 as the follow-up, maybe. Or sorry, it's white to move here. So like maybe bishop b5, bishop d7, and something that prevents the knight from going to c6. It's tricky. But I think the ultimate best position for white, or let's say bishop e3, knight f5, bishop f2. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes, and then bishop takes. This is a very possible way to lock off the advance of this d5 pawn. Knight could play to c6 here, but the bishop would pin it. Black could play a6 and then play the knight to c6. But then the queen would just take on d4. So say like this alternative, a6 and then a developing move, and then knight c6. And then castles, and then knight takes and queen takes, and there's nothing that can really knock off this. Yeah, sure, send it over, beginner. I'm super curious. Please send it, and we'll take a look. But yeah, so queen takes d4 here, and overall, white is better and can't be knocked off of the d4 square. Anyways, this is you know, I think the engine evaluates pawn takes c5 as okay, but given that white has this big center, pawn takes c5 makes white's control of the center much more ambiguous. I would lean towards bishop to e3, but you know, that's up to you, and there's some stylistic components to that as well. Here, you know, white still has a good center. The king is displaced with on f8. But it's just hard. It's, you know, white has to play very precisely in order to prevent this bishop from really becoming a problem on this king side. I think knight to c4 is probably the best, but because it's not takeable. But I don't know. There are other alternatives. But this white square diagonal needs to be like dealt with. This bishop otherwise is going to become too powerful. But yeah, anyways, it's a very interesting game. So in terms of tactical improvement, or in terms of improvements, the first one I think I would put, awesome. Okay, cool. Thanks, beginner. I'll put that for, I think the next open slot is tomorrow at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, but I'm adding that to my list right now. So thank you very much for sending it. We will get to that tomorrow at the stream that goes on at this time. Thanks for sending it. Appreciate you participating, beginners. I'm interested in looking at it. Yeah. So here, white has a better position, and but this bishop needs to be dealt with very carefully. From a thematic perspective, this pawn takes c5 is a little bit yeah. So that's how I've been doing this instruction stream. Eric, yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, so here, pawn takes c5 is a fine move, but I just think that it might be safer to go with a move like bishop to e3 here. This supports the center. This can't really be knocked off. You know, we went through a few of the sidelines, and it can't easily be knocked off of d4. Sure, yeah, I'll take a look, beginner. If you send it over, we can get to all of them in a slot tomorrow. But yeah, thanks for participating, and thanks for sending them over, beginner. Appreciate it. So yeah, so from a thematic perspective, you know, not compromising the center is probably good. You know, you see this more out of like, you know, the French. Basically, I would compare this this pawn structure to sort of like a French pawn structure, where you know, you really aren't supposed to take the pawn on c5. Here it's actually okay, but it does diminish your center control. Cool, awesome, thanks beginner. Yeah, if you keep sending them, I'll add them to my list. I'll look at them all in a single slot, but sure. Yeah, and then but yeah, but with this bishop e3 continuation, pieces can't really get knocked off of the d4 square, and the d5 pawn can't advance, and the bishop can't become extremely powerful on b7. So that's what I would that's sort of what I would take away from that from a strategic perspective. From a tactical perspective, knight ce4 is a tough move to see, but a cool one that the engine finds. So we can just look at that for a second. Here, you know, it's sort of it's unusual for sure that the knight that the queen on d8 is you know, completely undefended at this point, but it is. So you know, knight ce4 becomes a strong tactical possibility at this point. Potentially moving to knight d6, but you know, overall, you know, bringing another piece in, which was your strategic idea, which I thought was correct. You know, you brought the queen in, but the interesting and hard to see tactical play was that the correct piece to bring in as a reinforcement to attack the black king side was this knight. Tricky, difficult to see, but a potential improvement in this game. Here, you know, the strong diagonal for the bishop on b7 unfortunately really becomes a problem for white. There's not really that much play once that diagonal gets open. So yeah, I guess here I would say, you know, hold on to the center, and if you're gonna castle kingside, pairing it with a consolidated center that can't basically be disrupted is probably your best course of action. So from a thematic point, I think I would lean towards bishop to e3. And then there was a tactical improvement later. But those I think are two takeaways from this game. Like I think it was kind of a rough game. You have a big lead at move 8 and a big lead at move 11, and good pressure on a king whose safety's kind of compromised here. But yeah, unfortunately that bishop to b7 kind of basically became an extremely strong piece, directly attacking your king, and that provided black with the compensation that he needed. So bishop e3 I think was a way to sidestep all of this. Objectively speaking, I'm sure it's fine among multiple moves that are fine on this move, but I think I would lean towards that as a takeaway. This bishop b7 combined with this castling got super dangerous if white can't hold the center static. But yeah, anyways, thanks so much for sending it, Six. I hope that was helpful. I really appreciate you sending the game and coming in from Reddit. Please keep sending games. I'm happy to look over as many as you have, and yeah, I really appreciate you participating and joining the stream. Thanks a lot for that. I'm gonna move on to the next game. This one is from I think this might be Dennis's game, but let's take a look. Yeah, so this is a game from Dennis. He was interested in looking. So this was not a game that Dennis played. This is a very interesting game that I actually looked at, and I thought it was a good use of this slot. Yeah, no, thanks so much. Six. I really appreciate you coming by and sending the game. It really helps when everyone's engaged and able to contribute material. Really makes the stream cool. So I appreciate you being here, and thank you for helping out. So this is a game. I think it's Spassky Fisher, but it's a very interesting one, and I wanted to kind of go over it quickly if we have a chance. So. It's Rui Lopez, Hungarian defense with this bishop to e7. I think that's called a Hungarian defense. They're calling it the Morphy defense, but I thought it was Hungarian with bishop e7. Anyways, thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for sending games. I'm super happy to do this analysis, and I hope it's helpful. It helps me. I learn plenty of stuff from this. So thank you all for participating and making it a successful stream. So this is a Rui Lopez game. Dennis sent it to me because it actually has established and well-known theory to the 36th move. This is like some hardcore, former grandmaster type chess. This classic grandmaster moves, basically plays to equality. The actual line that Dennis sent me, if you look at it on move 18, it actually shows 2 100s because it's in book, right? So it's perfectly in book to move 18. It actually goes even further. So on move 18, this game has been played at master level and probably like IM/GM level like 80 times. This theory. I'll go back and do it more slowly, but I just sort of want to show what happens here. This ends up being, I think, Fisher Spassky. But it's super interesting, and it basically I think if you run it to move 36, it'll still show perfection here, which is cool. And it ends up being a draw because both sides played extremely well. But basically, it ends up in this opposite colored or basically end game with 2 minor pieces, and pretty cool looking, in my opinion. So we can go back here and take a look at a bit of this analysis. It's a good question, Eric. That's not an opening that I know particularly well. I think it's probably playable at master level, but yeah, you should send over a few games, Eric, and we can take a look at it. I'd have to know a little bit more about the specifics of what what's happening in these games to give you a good guidance. Um, but that's interesting. Yeah, interesting. Eric. Yeah, I think I can try to help at least, and maybe learn that opening a little bit better myself. Um, so, anyways, this yeah. So basically, let's play through this slowly. This is a really mainline Rui Lopez, extremely well known, played at master level, interesting stuff. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5, A6, bishop A4, knight F6, castles, and like I was saying, this is all book, but we can see C3 with the threat of D4 getting played. Black proactively plays D5. I'm gonna guess the eval is relatively close to equal, but this is basically theory in even if it was a little bit off of an equal game. This is a theory that's been shown to be equal through a lot of empirical testing. Anyways, this rook takes c6, d4, and overall black's showing slightly better, but still well within book. Advantages for white here. Bishop to c2, queen to d3, threatening h7. Interesting. This rook could potentially become, a piece that's used on the king side, but it's a little bit difficult for white to mount an immediate threat, even with bishop c2 and bishop facing towards h6. It's tricky. I don't necessarily. Yeah, I think that's probably the strategy for white, is to start putting pressure on black's king side here. But it's not super obvious to me what the best movements forward are. Still in book, that queen h4. Basically this. Since it's book theory, I think we should go through it slowly. There's probably deviations, but this is probably solid enough theory that there's an aspect of memorization that might be helpful here. So queen h5 plays into plays to the end of this theoretical line. This has been played like 80 times, like I was saying, black is probably going to secure the long diagonal here. Threats on e1. Knight potentially could take e3, although it would have to be maybe after the rook moves or at a particularly opportune time. It's not playable yet. I think that loses too much. Giving up the exchange is too much for black here. It's a complicated and equal position. I think this queen side is probably going to play to a draw, pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5, and I don't know if a lot of more can be done over here. It's pretty locked up. But I sort of feel that way about the king side too. So, the king side especially, I don't think there's a way that black can really effectively advance this attack. So it's really just a very equal position, and 80 different tries have been taken at trying to improve it from either side. The main attempts were either a takes b5 or queen to f1. Queen to f1 provides a more calm defense. White's not going to be rushed on defense if he plays queen f1. He might be able to play f3, maybe. You'd probably have to trade off the knight first, but f3, knocking the bishop out and kind of making the king side so that it's not so directly attacked by black pieces. But overall, here a takes b5 or queen f1 are the two main concepts. I think this was played in a Fischer-Spassky game or one of the classic 1970s World Championship type games. A takes b5, a takes b5, knight f1, rook fe8, bishop d1, and overall here this looks like looks pretty solid. Black has some attacking chances, but probably not enough pieces to get in, and white will work on improving his rook, probably maybe trading it off for black's rook. But it's not as if there's a mating attack here. This position still shows a positive eval for white. It's dangerous for white, but with careful play, should be able to equalize. Like maybe bishop b3, knight e3 or something. You know, there are multiple tactically good defensive plans for white here. But overall, thank you very much for sending it in, Dennis. This is very interesting theory. Just for anyone who's new, like feel free. You know, it doesn't have to be your viewer games. Like, you know, I guess my thinking for this is like I want to do basically 6 15-minute sets of lessons. But if someone would prefer to like look over an end game or like look over a candidate master game or look over a particular opening or something, instead of having their game reviewed, that's a different way that we could go with it, and one that I'm totally cool with. So, you know, you could also just send a suggestion like give me a slot for you know, to learn the Hungarian defense or whatever, and I would do it. So, you know, their lessons. I think lessons should be free. I think everyone should have access to free lessons. And I think this format is you know, working. So if you guys have ideas for things you'd like lessons on, that could be, you know, an alternative to sending over a game. But I'm totally cool with either. Please just you know, keep giving ideas for material, and we'll do them. This is really fun for me. I learn a lot. So I really appreciate you guys participating. Yeah. So bishop b5, castles. I play the Italian game as white. I play. I basically play e5 and you know, into the Ruy Lopez, an Italian game, as black. As d4, I have more, you know, I'm less set. I guess against d4 I play the Grunfeld, but I also play, you know, I've also been looking at some kind of more offbeat but still playable black lines. Like one in particular was d4, d5, c4, c5. That looks interesting for black and kind of unexplored. You know, realistically, that may not be a grandmaster level opening, but it might be a master level opening. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah, London is very solid. French is very solid. It's all about personal taste. I like you know, tactically aggressive positions and open games. That's just what I feel the most comfortable playing as. So that influences my choice of opening. Everyone has their own strengths. But you know, I play better in open games, tactical games. And if I can get those, I feel, you know, more comfortable. So I play openings to try to create that. Against Sicilian, I'm also kind of deciding. I've historically played g3. You know, yeah, no. And look, you know, I would be really stoked if like a grandmaster came tomorrow and started giving lessons for free to viewer games. Like that would really actually make me happy. Chess lessons should not be paid for. They should be free. And that's because, you know, chess lessons can be free. This format works. It will work for me. It will work for other masters and grandmasters. And we can run the price of a chess lesson down to 0 so that everyone can play. That's really my goal here. So I'd be very encouraged if other people adopted this format. Anyways, this... you know, this opening here is the mainline Ruy Lopez. You know, Dennis was emphasizing that this. Yeah, no, totally, and it just doesn't have to be that way, Banana. To be honest, I think you know, this is one of these things. Like we actually have the tech. Like we can make the cost of a chess lesson 0. I'm willing to give a chess lesson for 0. I'm sure many other people are as well. So I really think this is the next step forward. So anyways, just an idea. But I'm enjoying doing this, and we'll take it at this. You know, well, this is working for now, and I really appreciate you guys kind of participating in this experiment. This is a lot of fun for me, and I learn a lot too. So anyways, this you know, this is basically mainline Ruy Lopez that Dennis was super interested in, and I think it's cool. It's cool. It's cool theory. Offers a lot of chances for both sides, and there's 80 plus worth of games to look at if you know, if anyone wants to see them. But this is where basically the fork in the opening happens between these two main options, and then further splits on like the next move or two. But some very high level play, kind of indicating that this is objectively very good stuff. Yeah, thank you very much for sending that, Dennis. And if anyone else wants to send in games of this format, like opening theory or master games or any of that stuff, just go to I'll post my Discord right now, just so you guys know where to post it. But you can just post that material. I'll take a look at it, and we can make a solid 15-minute lesson out of it. I really appreciate all you guys participating. So here's my Discord, and for anyone who's new, if you want to post games, yeah, no, I'm super happy. I can totally give like a slot to 15-minute candidate games. I can try to explain what they're doing. The candidate games are like ridiculously strong. They're going to have things that are over my head. I promise. I think they're over everyone's head except for the people who are actually sitting there. But yeah, it's a good question, Jack. The answer is practically not super important. But in terms of understanding the game, it is helpful. Yeah. No, I mean, I can go through the kind of my summary of Grandmaster level games, but I think what really, so the first thing in Grandmaster level games is that tactically speaking, they're almost perfect. They really don't make tactical errors. Cool, yeah, thanks, Amet. I'll add this one for tomorrow at 6 p.m. Yeah, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. I've added that to the list, Amet. Yeah, no, I think it's really tough to understand. Basically the summary of a Grandmaster level game is they are tactically perfect, so no games are really decided on tactical errors. Occasionally there's like a small, inefficiency that allows some crazy tactical combination. But they calculated out well enough that there's absolutely no 3-move tactical errors, and there are very few basically a guy like Marshall or a guy like Tal is fairly unusual. They really do see most of the tactical brilliancies and just sidestep them or deal with them or whatever. They allow very few vulnerabilities in their game. The other thing that's really differentiating between a Grandmaster game and a Master game is they set up strategies that they really they make every move purposeful and fits into their broader strategy. So an idea would be like white gains a positional advantage if he opens the rook file, and then the Grandmasters will spend like 4 or 5 moves maneuvering so that their pieces are in exactly the right places in order to secure that opening on the rook file or whatever their positional goal is. Every move is purposeful. So first, their tactics are perfect. So tactical perfection probably gets you to like 2300 maybe. But then on top of that, their opening knowledge is great. They have a full understanding of why openings are played in the way that they are, and a pretty good memorization of the move orders. And then they have basically large, basically lengthy tactical setups where they execute each part of the plan in order, and spend a lot of time maneuvering to set up the plan so that that all the pieces are oriented towards the right part of the plan when they need it. So you see these crazy like knight A1, knight B3 to knight A1 to knight C2 type moves from Grandmaster games, and the reason why they do that is so that they have the knight exactly where they need it for whatever strategic plan they're going to establish. So anyways, on the topic of Grandmaster games, I can give it a shot, but I can't explain what 72% or that one guy who just spent 72 minutes on a move. I will bet my life that I will not be able to explain everything that he saw. Would I like to have a GM in terms of a GM who gives free lessons to everyone? Like, I'm sure Yeah, I'm sure there's some that could be pretty good. I mean, you would need someone who can explain things pretty well. But I think this is really the right format going forward. I think that the chess lessons can be made free. I think that chess lessons that are well explained can be made free too. And that's yeah, I think that's the next step. Anyways, but GM I favored. I like a lot of GMs. I know a few, but I won't pick favorites. There's a lot of good ones. Anyways, on to the next game. Thank you very much for showing those for showing that theory, Dennis. That was a good idea for an instructional game. Yeah, so here this is Wloff sent this game, and it's a queen's pawn game, an early development of the queen to d5. I guess this sort of transposes into a Scandinavian. I'm just gonna play through it. I haven't seen this game before, so I'd like to know it. Okay, interesting. And then I assume black ends up, or no, it ends up, yeah, it's a win for black, or it could have been a win for black. But yeah, let's go through. Let's go through this one. I'm curious. D4 F5 is the Dutch. C4 D5 is I think somewhat unusual, but still a Dutch opening. This this structure ends up being like a very difficult wall for white to break through. With D5 and F5, these can end up being very closed positional games with a lot of maneuvering. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. So let's see. Sorry, I should open up the analysis board here. D4, F5, C4, D5. If you look at this, there's only there's about 15,000 games, and only 2 of them have D5. I don't think D5 is that bad a move, to be honest, but I guess it does allow pawn takes D5 pretty early. If you actually play D5, there's a lot more. There's a lot more games. So on C takes D5, Queen takes D5, Knight C3, and then Queen D8, and that's the end of the opening book. It's a Scandinavian position now. It's basically a Scandinavian with F5. I don't know off the top of my head how that would impact the Scandinavian. I guess it would probably block off this bishop as being one of the main things, but it might still be a playable Scandinavian. One of the positives of the black F5 here would be keeping control over this E4 square. Queen D8, Queen A5 too. Is fine. But this ends up being basically a Scandinavian position now with F5 having been played. Anyways, this game has basically taken us out of the opening book. It's like Scandinavian Dutch, pretty much. It has characteristics of both now. But it's interesting. I mean, all the different openings are always interesting, very interesting stuff. And by now, basically black's queenside development is not very good. White's bishop on G, going from A2 to G8 is pretty good, and white is showing a much better eval. But here, though, I think with Knight C3, Queen A5, I'm pretty surprised that the eval is that favorable to white. I guess this really isn't playable as black. So we shouldn't. So I should make that clear. Like this Scandinavian Dutch is not a good idea. It gives white at least a pawn and a half on the eval. But I don't know. From a fundamental perspective, like I guess black's development is a little slow. But I do feel like the engine's being a little generous for white. Anyways, Queen D6, B6, and an overall strong position. I mean, white has a better pawn structure. This is much more natural than black's. Black's still connected but kind of disconnected pawn structure. E6 is going to be a good target for attack. So I think Knight f4 threatening e6 is something that I think is going to be pretty strong here. d5 might be a tactical push that white can do. And overall, I think white's going to have a pretty, white's basically going to have a pretty solid position here. Black is still equal in terms of material, but he's lacking in terms of development. Maybe king e7, and then at least that connects the rooks, and black can put up some force on c8. But overall, it's kind of interesting. I mean, other than this opening, which thematically is new, but I think ultimately not that good. This Scandinavian Dutch. Both sides just sort of play solidly and intuitively, and like they don't really there's not really that much surprising there. White's basically just holding on to his 1.5 pawn lead that's based off of a development, better development out of the opening. Pawn takes, bishop takes, knight e6. And here, the rooks are lining up to attack this d6 pawn. The d6 pawn is the weakest point in the black position, so it's probably a good idea for for white to make that his point of attack. I mean, you might as well attack the most vulnerable point, right, if you can. So this pawn may help white turn his initiative into an actual material advantage. So here, knight d4 is a way of trying to move this forward, but I guess I would say I'd probably look at, like, I'm thinking rook to c6. Rook to c6 forces king to e7, and then I'd move the knight in after that, like knight c3, knight b5. d6 is the right point of attack, and I think white, that's visible to white. But here, this is this basically gets this equalizes. Ultimately, what happens here is white doesn't get the time that he needs to establish an attack on this d6 pawn, and instead, white, I think knight d4, rook c6, knight c3, knight b5 provided a better tactical opportunity. But ultimately, what happens here is black trades off this weakest pawn, this pawn that was isolated on the d file, for a totally good pawn for white, and basically, when the biggest vulnerability gets traded for something that wasn't much of a vulnerability, that's a good trade for whoever eliminated the vulnerability in the position. So now here, we're really pretty close to equal. So here, this looks pretty. I mean, it ends up being a draw. I'm not sure the rook and pawn and king and pawn endgame here was optimal. I'm sort of tempted to give that like a, I'm tempted to give that its own slot someday, so we can take a look at that, at more length. But it's technical and complicated, and I'm not so great at it myself. These endgame positions, but basically, ultimately, it trades into an equal endgame. So white did know. I think white should be focused on this d6 pawn as the biggest point of attack. So I guess from the strategic perspective, I think white did a good job refuting black's kind of not so good opening, and then after that. I think there were some slight tactical improvements that could be made to attack this d6 pawn more efficiently. And I think if that happens, I think white's got a pretty good position. I mean, if white can win the d6 pawn and be a pawn up, that should probably be a win. So here, I guess I would say leave things complicated. White has an initiative because black has this very very noticeable vulnerability on d6. So I wouldn't be trading as white here. I would be, no, for sure. No, I think it's good that you see it. It obviously is like it's a really good thing to pick up as the weakest point on black's position. And I think if it's good that you saw it, and I think that that's the way, that's half the battle. But I think the tactical execution here is the most important thing. But yeah, I guess in general I wouldn't trade since black has more obvious vulnerabilities. If black has vulnerabilities but you don't yet have a material advantage, I would leave the pieces on the board to try to use them to make more efficient moves and exploit the vulnerabilities. So like rook c6, I think. Yeah, rook c6 is, I mean, it's an awkward move, so I sort of get it. But the tactical concept behind this is that king to d7 is not actually playable, because if on king d7, the rook will take d6 because the rook won't be defending d6 anymore. So rook c6 basically it basically forces an awkward move by black, king e7, and here the knight starts getting in. So yeah, so I think you played a good game. To be completely honest, I think this game here, is basically close to winnable. White, has pretty good chance of winning the d6 pawn, and if he does win the d6 pawn, then he will probably win the game. Overall, I think the game was pretty solid. You or your opponent played an unorthodox opening, and you came up with a good solution for it. So, yeah, good work on that. And just this small kind of misstep in terms of tactical execution turned it from a win into a draw. But overall, I don't think there's that many errors from white in this game. Maybe in the end game, but overall, I thought this was reasonable for most of the game. The engine will probably point to some slight improvements from a tactical perspective. Knight to f4 maybe, putting pressure on this e6 pawn. Yeah, no, here might be a good position to play knight f4. Maybe. This queen puts like a pretty direct threat. I mean, here knight f4 is not as playable, just because I guess it's still saying knight f4 is the best move, but doubling these pawns on the f file or losing one is sort of a weird way to, it's kind of an unusual thing to have happen. Let's actually look through, because I think knight f4 is a move that makes sense to me, for sure. So I think if we look at knight f4, let's go through the computer line, because it's complicated. No, for sure. No, it makes sense to me. This is complicated. I don't have this solved. I'm going through the computer line just because it's faster. But I sort of want to just see what happens. Like, so basically, white, the main computer line, black declines the trade. Let's see what happens if black accepts the trade. So e takes f4, queen takes f4, and white's given a huge eval. I think this must be good. I think on d5, this position for black is pretty vulnerable. This pawn's, white's threatening to take this pawn, and if the pawn moves, white can immediately play rook e1 and disrupt the king's ability to get out from, basically the attack from these two bishops, and basically all of white's pieces, actually, like this rook, this queen, this rook. So yeah, that is actually really pretty. That's very difficult to see. Wloff. Like I when I play, when the computer recommends knight f4 here, I'm like, what? That looks like it hangs a pawn. But apparently and if we play through it, apparently white gets, the positional advantage that he needs to compensate for that lost f pawn. But it's weird. No, I think in a slow game you would have more of a shot at it. I think you would see, okay, well, I played knight f4, and then he plays, and we can stop at one other place, because I played it all the way through, but like knight f4, pawn takes f4, pawn takes f4, and then, like knight a6, or like bishop to b5 or something. But yeah, seeing that this generates a strong positional advantage is a tricky thing to do. It's not, Not easy. A slow game, you'd have a better shot at it, because you would play it through in your head and you'd be like, oh, well, okay, so this bishop's diagonal gets super good if this knight moves, and if the e pawn moves off of the e rank, the rook's going to have exposure to the king here. But really hard to see. I don't know. Yeah, it makes sense when you do it, right? But I looked at the opening. I didn't see it immediately. I looked at the engine line. So it's hard to see. In a slow game, I think you'd have a shot. I think you would have more of a shot than you might think. In a fast game like that, playing something counterintuitive where you hang a pawn for positional advantage, really tricky. But overall, a super interesting game, and yeah. But yeah. So knight f4 was playable, and then I think the biggest improvements that can be made are maintaining force on this d6 pawn, and seeing that when you attack this d6 pawn, black's forced with the awkward defending move king e7, and you'll probably win the d6 pawn. So yeah, so there's some middle game complications, but in terms of walking out of this game, like I think something that I can point to is like this was a good opportunity to attack what's pretty clearly a weak square on black's on black's side. So keep I would say in a position like that, don't trade off until you have the material edge, and use all of your pieces if you can to try to secure the material edge by winning d6. It's overall a very interesting game. A few interesting things there. There's some tactical efficiencies in the center that are in the middle of the game, like the middle game, that probably could be improved upon. I think there's a few kind of tricks in this end game. A few errors from certainly a C1 or two, but yeah, no. It's hard to see. It's just hard to see any of these games. So I recommend Tactics Prep. Jen made me a little like a little sticker or whatever, like an emoji, like one of those emojis that you can get from the channel watch points or whatever. Jen made me one that says Tactics in big red letters. But I know since basically for anyone who hasn't been here before. I spend a lot of time harping on how important it is to learn tactics under 2000 and especially under 1500. I say use a tactics trainer like Chess Tempo or CT-ART or any of those. Tactics training I think will help you see better ways to exploit this d6 vulnerability. The pawn is pinned to the knight, right? I'll save it for the next show, but Jen drew a very cute little tactics emoji, which was very nice of her. So, anyways, we have that to look forward to. So here I guess I would just say this d6 pawn is something that white can capitalize on, and if white capitalizes on it, I think his chances of winning are pretty good. Otherwise, it was good. Yeah, no, of course. No, thank you very much for sending the game, Wloff, and please keep sending them. They're super interesting, and it was great. Great play. You basically, held to equality against, or basically you held the initiative against an inferior opening, which is not so easy. And with slightly better tactical execution in the end game, I'm pretty sure you would have won this one. Overall, interesting game. Thank you very much for sending it, and thank you for joining the stream. Thanks. Let's go to the next one. We have two more. One is from Poundrow from Reddit, and one is from Flanky from the Chess Study Group Discord. Let's take a look here. Poundrow was playing black, so let's take it from his perspective. Poundrow plays the Sicilian. This is pretty well established theory. And e5 looks pretty early to be playing e5. Basically, this is very well established theory. There's probably, it looks like about 30, almost 4,000 games played out of it. But e5 is a deviation from theory here, and probably one that black can exploit. I think basically black here can capital. I think this is an overextension. I think e5, sort of neutralizes white's center earlier than it needs to be neutralized. So like on e5, pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5. I guess you could technically say that white still controls the center here, but this pawn is very vulnerable. It's isolated and overextended. I think black's going to win this pawn if it comes to that trade, which is what happened in the game actually. So I think black's going to have a favorable eval here and good opportunities to make some plays at winning that e5 pawn. I guess I would say I like queen takes e7 better. I think on developing the knight, so basically I understand knight takes pawn, because let's say like queen takes, so what was played in the game was knight takes pawn, or knight takes bishop, sorry, knight takes e7. But queen takes e7 I think is stronger. But I understand the reason for not wanting to play queen takes e7, which is this knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, ends up with black worsening his pawn structure and giving him this isolated queen's pawn. There's specific ways in which an isolated queen's pawn is meant to be played, but it generally involves capitalizing on open lines for the bishop. But here black's showing a good edge, and this e5 pawn is like definitely going to get lost here. Whereas the black pawn is going to be not the easiest to defend, but probably still defendable. So that's the logic behind playing queen takes e7 instead of knight takes e7. On knight takes e7, this e5 pawn is still vulnerable. I think white is still, I think black is still in pretty good shape, even though the engine is slightly better for white. But overall, the knight outpost on d5 is pretty good, so you may want to maintain it, or at least force the knight to trade to get it. Also, if you play queen takes e7 and knight takes knight, you have more open lines on this e5 pawn, which is pretty much guaranteed to get lost. So, anyways, very interesting. Knight takes e7, I think is makes sense. Both sides are developing straightforwardly here. Knight to f5, which is a good outpost, but knight to f6, which is really a rough, puts black in a really rough tactical position. And here, this, basically once the king side is opened like that, it's a really tough game for black to play. So white had a very powerful attack here. Knight f6 became a really big problem, like surprisingly quickly. I think the error here is g6. Knight to g6 is a better way to defend h7. Knight h6 will have its own problems. h4 is going to get played, then probably h5, then probably g4. But or maybe on on knight g6, h4, maybe then queen takes e5. Or actually, you know what? This is tactically complicated. But knight takes e5, h5, knight takes d3, and the threat is gone. The h7 threat, the knight is no longer pinned to h7. So that's the logic of that. It's some tactical complexity. So bishop d3 and then knight g6. Both defensive moves will have challenges. But the issue here is that g6 opens the f6 pawn and the dark squares to white to make attacking easier. It's tougher to defend. Basically, anytime you make anytime post castling that you're moving your pawns, you're worsening your king safety. I mean, that's not always true, but it's a good general guideline. Basically. G6 does provide the temporary relief of the queen h7 checkmate threat, but knight g6, does that as well, and doesn't have the same weakening effect on the king side dark squares that G6 causes. G6 just looks like or F6 just looks like a really good outpost for a knight, and ultimately White is able to get a knight to F6 and cause a lot of problems. So this is the move that so there's two moves here that I think I would revisit. I think Queen takes E7 is better because it opens up attacking lines on the E5 pawn, even though it gives you this isolated pawn on D5. Knight takes E7 is knight takes E7 is not the worst thing, but not as good as Queen takes E7. But I think the real kind of missed, it was a tough, it's a tough game, and White played pretty accurately. But the misstep here I think is knight to G6. I think knight to G, or the misstep here was G6, opening up this threat. The answer is, it depends on the situation. Any pawn move worsens your kingside defense. Basically, is H5 leaves a vulnerability to G4 after H4. You're basically providing a lever for your opponent to attack. So the traditional way of attacking G6 here would be like H4, H5, pawn takes G6, and opening up the rook file. But just, if you can avoid moving pawn, if you're not required, there's many situations in which you are literally required to. But if you have the choice between, opening, basically defending your king on a kingside attack with a pawn move or not, or defending it with like a piece move, the piece move is generally better. Moving your pawns, defending your king worsens your king's safety. Moving a piece, can potentially be undone. In this particular case, G6, this was a choice where basically G6 and knight G6 were both okay in terms of developing, or in terms of eliminating a direct checkmating threat. One of those two moves was necessary. So as a principle, knight to G6 is probably better because G6 will create more opportunities for White on the king side as a king side attack. So knight to G6, and White will attack with H4, but Black will have responses and threaten the D3 bishop, basically eliminating the pin of the knight on H7. That if in a replayed game, I think that's a move that's worth looking at. Knight G6 over G6 here. G6 pawn moves around your king tend to worsen your king's safety after castling. They're still necessary in some cases, but that's a general principle. Chess there's a lot of general principles that aren't always true, but it's a general guideline. So here, knight to F6, king H8, bishop takes, pawn takes, and here, I think Black is in trouble very quickly. This outpost, this outpost on F6 really caused Black a lot of problems. So maybe the better strategy would be like knight to D5. But something to prevent, like knight to D5 here probably is a better. White has still secured an initiative, and this isn't fantastic for Black either, to be honest. But basically creating, not allowing that outpost of the knight on F6. That F6 was a super dangerous outpost for that knight to be on. Otherwise, I think it's a tough position. White made this. I think it's an error of creating this over advanced isolated pawn and neutralizing the pawns in the center. I think Queen E7 may have been a more efficient way to respond to that. And then just unfortunately, both sides are sort of developing normally, but White gets this quick kingside attack, and I think En G6 is a better way to respond to it. Overall, I think that's pretty much Yeah, I think unfortunately that one error, that G6, gave White an opportunity to really exploit the F6 square. We can go through the book lines to see how optimally it's played, but this move creates a lot of openings for Black that are going to be difficult to defend against. If it could be avoided with Knight to G6, that's probably an improvement. Knight to G6 also threatens White's weakest point on the board, which is the E5 pawn. E5 pawn's probably going to get taken pretty soon. I also sort of wanted to look at this one line, H4, Queen takes E5. Yeah, this looks pretty close to equality. I guess Knight takes C6, Queen takes E4, Pawn takes C6, Bishop takes, or sorry, wait, transpose it wrong. H4, Queen takes, Knight takes, Queen takes, Bishop takes, Pawn takes, and I guess that gives that means that Black doesn't fully realize the pawn edge here. So for that reason, Knight takes is actually better. Knight takes and White has an edge. Just the Queen takes is also tempting, but the Bishop getting to E4 and taking on C6 means that Black doesn't actually win material there. Yeah, so knight G6, and then some knight taking, or basically the C knight taking E5 and trading off the bishop. That was the best tactical idea. But I think the thematic idea is, if you can choose between moving the pawns around your king or not moving the pawns around your king after you've castled, choosing not to tends to provide you with fewer vulnerabilities. Sometimes it's necessary, but often, but sometimes it's not, like in this case. Anyways, a very interesting game. But the improvements, Queen takes E7 was slightly better because post capture it allows this attack on E5 and E5 to fall more easily, and the other being Knight G6 against this mating threat provides less vulnerabilities on the king side. Overall, interesting game. Thank you very much for sending it. Yeah, thank you very much for sending it, Poundrow, and I really appreciate you sending it in from Reddit and participating in the stream. Please come back. I hope this is helpful, and we'll have many more opportunities in the future to review games. So thank you very much for joining the stream, and thank you for contributing to it. Cool. So final game of the night. This is from Flanky from the Chess Study Group Discord. I will pull that up now. Okay. Okay. So Flanky is playing black here. He plays Caro-Kann, responded to with white d3. That's kind of offbeat. It's not unheard of, but kind of a strange response to the Caro-Kann. Not very aggressive for white. Basically, blocks in his light-scored bishop and doesn't, control the center as much as d4 does. But it's a playable move. D5, and then e takes, pawn takes. And already here, I'm gonna bet that black has a positive eval. Yeah, so black gets a good eval. This is not really a great way for white to play against the Caro-Kann. White has sort of not done great development for this bishop. He controls less of the center. He's basically given up, some of the initiative, that white generally has. And yeah, I think black's basically and actually white can restore symmetry with this, but now if white plays knight c3 restoring symmetry, it's black to move, so black has secured a full tempo in a symmetrical position if white wants to play in that particular way. Instead, white plays c3, black is developing quickly, black is winning. And d takes e5, knight takes. And yeah, and actually there's some good tactical blows here. I think the engine recommends rook takes e1 first, disrupting the queen and bishop battery. But either rook takes e1, queen takes e1, bishop takes f4, pawn takes f4, or bishop takes f4 directly, pawn takes f4. Both of those leave white with a really compromised pawn structure. So this is looking good for black, for sure. Yeah, so bishop f4 I think was not probably the right move. Bishop f4 allows for that doubling and disruption of the kingside pawns. An improvement for white, I guess. Maybe knight d2. I understand that black wants to get his pieces developed, but that particular bishop f4 move has an issue with this knight takes check. I'm thinking maybe bishop to g5 could be playable. Maybe. No, but that hangs the h3 pawn. So here, rook takes, queen takes, bishop takes h3, and black has won a pawn. So yeah. So here I'm thinking straightforward development, or the engine actually suggests knight takes e5, bishop takes e5. That probably is better for white. I'm a little resistant to doing that just because this is this is a center that black controls. But it's still probably better. I think this is good for. I think this is still good for black here, even though, or basically this is still the best option for white here, even though black has basically gotten the center. Black is already winning basically. The d5 pawn is stronger than the c3 pawn, and black has center control. So definitely from the time of pawn takes e5, and maybe even the move before, black has consolidated his center, and he's stronger in the middle. Thank you, Kiro. Thank you very much for helping with that. I appreciate I appreciate all your help with that, and hopefully it's a good it's going the correct direction. So yeah, thank you, Kiro, and thank you for all the games that you've sent in and the help that you've provided to the stream. Yeah, so knight takes e5, knight takes f3, and here, think black's just basically got a good attack going on the white king side. I just want to make sure. Black sent. Oh, okay. Let's go. Let's go back. I think there's some things to take a look at here. So I think black basically had a good game the entire way through. So let's think of an improvement for white here. Here basically, this is So basically, this opening is a little bit too passive for white. I think there's an improvement to be made almost immediately, which is on this d3. I think d4 is a better way to go about this. Caro-Kann's a tough opening to play against. I understand wanting to play King's Indian attack against the Caro-Kann. It will take your opponent out of book. But I think it's still a little bit too simple a position to try to basically it's too simple a position to try to play the King's Indian attack and not black to get some compensation. I'm definitely going to advocate a d4 move, knight c3 move, or c4 move. Something that's more challenging to white here. There's something that's more challenging to black. I think the mainline Caro-Kann's probably your best route forward. So I'm thinking that you may want to steer away from d3. After d5, the engine still provides some positive for white here. But I think white's opportunities to secure an advantage are tricky. c4 I think is c4 I think maybe an improvement. I've played e4 c4 against the Caro-Kann. It leads to a position that's very simplified, sort of drawish, and but interesting. White gets good bishop development here, but I think drawing chances are fairly high, and d4 provides an opportunity for basically d4 provides an opportunity for white to get his bishops out. Yeah, it's like a Scandinavian basically, but more drawish, I think, because basically this has a very neutralized center. But yeah, I think here, Flanky, I think d3 just isn't that. I think unfortunately it's just not super playable. I mean, the eval is almost a +1. Knight c3 is kind of offbeat and not the main line. c4 is offbeat and kind of not the main line, but d3 I understand because you could be playing a super booked up Caro-Kann opponent here, but it just doesn't challenge. I just don't think it challenges black enough. Then d4 does a lot more. I play the mainline Caro-Kann. Just in case you want to see the mainline Caro-Kann, if everyone, basically it's got 10 moves that always go exactly the same way, or almost exactly the same way. Knight g3, bishop g6, h4, knight d7, knight h4, h4, h6, h5, bishop h7, knight f3, knight d7, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, and queen takes d3. Queen takes d3 on move 10. And basically white's in pretty good. White's basically in pretty good shape here. This is the mainline Caro-Kann. I don't know if that has any appeal to you, but it's pretty safe. c4 is an offbeat alternative to the Caro-Kann. d5, pawn takes d5, pawn takes, knight takes, knight c3. This is definitely playable for white as well. But yeah, I think d3 is an idea, but is gonna cause some problems when black is somewhat unchallenged. d5, pawn takes d5, d4, knight c6, c3. But black basically already has the lead here. I think this is instructive for sure, because I think there are some serious, there's improvements that can be made. White, who's basically has his pawns less advanced, should play a developing move here. Knight f3, e4, d4 leads to some issues. The knight has to go to e2, but I think knight d2 is solid. Knight d2 and knight f3. I think are both ways that white can kind of develop in a straightforward way and maintain the initiative. But d3 in general is passive, and I think you may have better results playing a slightly more main line here. This is just too much of a developmental edge for black. You don't need to give black this big a developmental edge, and it ends up not taking black out of theory so much anyways. So yeah, so I'm gonna advise against play openings that you're comfortable with, but I'm gonna advise against d3. Here, knight d2, knight f3 are the best sort of ways to continue to continue moving this forward. Here, it's a complicated opening, but I think it's just one of these things where it unfortunately, and bishop f4 is a tactical oversight, although one that makes tons of sense. Having bishop f4 is a really easy tactical oversight to make. Knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes, pawn takes is not an issue that loses material. But it's a tactical play that black has that leads to white to having a worse pawn structure. So not a traditional tactic, but a vulnerability that gets provided to white. Here, I guess I would say probably bishop to d2 is better, but knight takes e5, bishop takes e5 is the best alternative. But I really just think I think that's not. I think there needs to be an improvement on the way that the Caro-Kann was sidestepped here. This center and this already positive eval for black means that the opening was an issue, and it's not unfortunately, it's not super exciting. Like, basically black kind of keeps the pressure on, and the rest of the game is pretty easy for him to play. So I think just the improvement. I think the Caro-Kann with D3. I think is just not gonna work. Uh, Maybe there's a way to get it to work, but it looks really passive to me. And the Caro-Kann offers white an opportunity to really get an advantage in the center, but this doesn't make much of a play for it. It's I like the idea of taking your opponent out of theory that he knows, but I think C4 might be a better offbeat way to do that. C4 or honestly, I've played E5. I assume this is bad, but it at least is it's sort of challenging at least. But I've actually even played this. There are ways to sidestep the Caro-Kann or to sidestep a super dangerous play in the Caro-Kann, or super well prepared dangerous player in the Caro-Kann. But I guess what I would say is I think D3 may just not be playable. I understand like it's a variation, but I think I can just say at my level, and knight d2, I guess. This just seems to create more problems for white than it fixes. You've sort of ceded the initiative when you didn't need to. I'm going to advise mainline Caro-Kann or offbeat c4, maybe. But d3, I've got, maybe playable, but I've got questions about this variation because it gives white problems that don't need to be incurred. Let's play through a c4 game just so we can look at it. C4 is the second most popular move. D4 is about an 80% move, but C4 is the second most popular move. D5, C takes D5, D4, knight F6. This has some similarities to the French exchange with C4. E6, knight F3, bishop B4, and you're playing something, but it's clearly not the mainline Caro-Kann. So if you want to take your opponent out of the book in the Caro-Kann, I think this provides a pretty good option. D3, I don't think it's challenging enough. C6, C4, D5, pawn takes, and then C takes D5 is playable. This is the line we were looking at a minute ago with that looks like Scandinavian line. But I guess I would say maybe even after C takes E takes, D4, and you have better control of the center as white. Pawn takes C4 isn't that great. Bishop takes C4 sort of helps white. So I think evaluating the opening on this one. Unfortunately, just not much of a chance after move like 3, which is a bummer. I've been in that place many times myself. It's basically it's tough to it's tough to play a game like this. Like I used to play this looks like me playing the modern, to be honest. It's just like secures and it's not challenging to my opponent. This is what happens to me every time I play the modern. Basically, is my opponent gets a big positional advantage and developmental advantage. So I think playing a more straightforward, more challenging opening is the advice that I would give you as someone giving a lesson. The openings are stylistic. There's probably a way to make D3 work. But I think you may have better results out of another opening. This is a very conservative way to play, probably too much so. But yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for sending the game, Flanky. Please send another. I want to see, maybe I can do something helpful for the black side of the openings. But yeah, this is a rough game. Just a tough one. But I think just changing the opening, I think may be helpful here. Yeah. other than that, I think everyone, would. I think I and everyone benefits from tactical training. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone sending openings, openings theory for Dennis, or games in for analysis for everyone else. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for participating in the stream and helping this all work. And I really appreciate you all being here and contributing. So thanks. I'll next stream is at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. And yeah, look forward to seeing you there. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.